On this episode of Danielosophy, I'm hosting a discussion about how Christians respond to American social issues. When we think of our popular trends, values, and the tough choices we have to make in life, and even our justice system, we can become distracted and forget about loving our neighbors as much as we love ourselves. Even though the Bible counsels us and helps us make choices, talking it out with friends can help us stay on the right track. Blank. Awesome. So welcome back to Danielosophy. This is my show where basically in this episode, we're talking about culture and Christian responses in culture. The issue becomes, when things like police brutality happens, when there are mass shootings, when there are, people in office that we disagree with, how are we as believers responding? Thank you all for joining my show. You can give yourselves a hand. Woo, yay, awesome, great, awesome. So I just want to notify those who are watching that some people, they're like driving somewhere. They had like some extemporaneous, extended circumstances or something like that. Anyway, and hopefully they'll, be able to participate in the conversation, and we'll get more people joining as they come. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk about was simply our view of America, right? So we all live in America. We identify as American citizens, but as believers, as Christians, there is a line that we just don't cross. There's a difference between us in some ways, as in like there are American values and Christian values. So in your opinion, and whoever wants to go first, you would just, I don't know, I guess raise your hand. In your opinion, what do you think about America?
I'll go. Do you call on me? Do I wait till you call, teacher?
Go ahead.
Okay. I mean, in terms of America, we over time have moved farther and farther away from what we call ourselves to be. So they say that we're a Christian nation founded on Christian principles, but that's very, very far from the case. I think as it stands now in 2020 and previous years even. So yeah, I think we're going by a name that we don't quite display.
I feel that. Would anyone like to respond or add or give?
Yeah, I go. Being 18 and still not getting to live the rest of 20s and 30s and not knowing a bunch, but it's definitely very different at being a teenager now because things are being spoken out about, and our generation is evolving into this whole another thing, and it's crazy. So being an American, like what even is that now? Because we're changing in so many different directions. So it's very hard to be like, well, what is an American besides being born here? But that doesn't necessarily mean that makes you an American,
Yeah. So I'll go. So something that I think about when I think of America, I think, there are a lot of trends. There are a lot of fads. And, for example, like the vegan movement. And I feel like, nothing's wrong with being vegan, but, now there's this trend, and it's not based on, some sort of actual belief on the inside. It's kind of like, oh, this is cool. Oh, this is sweet. And this is popular. And I think that one of the major aspects of being an American is this sort of like, oh, because I'm an American, you know, I kind of have rights. I have freedoms. And because of these freedoms, not that I can do what I want to do, but often it's like, oh, I can indulge. One of the major things that I noticed was, you know, like, for example, binge watching. And like, people love Netflix, people love their television, and we can watch television as much as we want to. And, you know, because we are Americans, and because we have been given these freedoms, we, especially during this time, during the quarantine, like, we just kind of, we indulge. And I feel like that and to me is one of the aspects of America that really hurts us as believers. It hurts us in some ways, because it's like, we need, you know, I think a part of being a Christian is self-control, you know, being able to, you know, set lines between, you know, who I am as a believer and who I can be in America. Something else that I think about, you know, we got this government thing going on, right? So whatever, but, you know, like, there are things happening in the government that we disagree with all the time, just all the time. And I was actually talking to my mom the other day, and I was telling her, I was like, I don't think that, you know, America is God's government. And she was like, well, what do you mean by that? And I thought about it, and I was like, when I think about the government today, when I think about the issues that we face, I don't think that the government responds, you know, with prophecy. I don't think that they respond by saying, oh, the prophet Isaiah says blank, you know, like, they don't say, oh, I'm going to pray about it, you know, and then they pray about it. Like that's not what's happening. You know, I remember, you know, the whole like Black Lives Matter movement that happened. And then you see this picture of some of the representatives and senators, some congressmen and women. They were kneeling, and they had like some like sash on, and that, I guess, that was supposed to like embody their support of Black Lives Matters. And it's like, you know, and I'm seeing all of this, and I get it, but my thing is, you know, and it becomes an issue when you notice, like, people aren't praying, people aren't still aren't being kind to each other, they still aren't. And it's like, what is the government promoting? What is the leader of the government promoting? What are our officials, even in our communities, promoting? And I think that because they aren't doing exactly like what I think, or they aren't promoting this sort of, you know, image, this sort of godliness, I think that America is just different from me, from my values, from what I want in my life. What do y'all think?
So let's go back to your comment on boundaries and like setting those lines, those strong, like just clear boundaries. I think part of that comes with us, like, just as humans. It's really, really hard in life sometimes to set those boundaries. Even for you personally, going into the fridge, that may be a boundary that you need to make. Hey, I don't need another cupcake. Hey, I don't need another plate. So even when we look at things like that we do every day, I think that kind of plays into it as well. Just the overall freedom aspect, and the freedom to decide, and to have enough to say, oh no, I don't eat leftovers, or to have enough to say, I just don't want that, you know? Like kids who don't eat what their parents cook. They're like, oh no, I don't want that, I don't eat that. So when we talk about those kind of freedoms, and then we look at it from a spiritual perspective, if you can't practice setting boundaries in your life in a practical everyday situation, how much more difficult is it to set them within a spiritual mindset?
Yeah, I would even tack onto that, and on top of us having, I guess, what you would call a lack of self-control when it comes to things, because I do agree with your point, Daniel and Demario, as well, that added on to that we've always been given freedom of choice. Like, that was part of the purpose of, you know, God putting us on earth is that we're commanded to do things. And it's like scripture says, everything is permissible, but not everything's beneficial. So there are plenty of things that we've always been allowed to do whatever we want. But I think we're moving into such an individualistic space in society where everybody is worried only about themselves and what gratifies them and what pleases them. And even from a Christian perspective, when it comes to things like identifying sin or creating accountability for your brother and sister, it's really more a mindset of like, well, as long as it doesn't bother me, as long as it doesn't get in my way, it doesn't matter what you do. And I think we're so focused on what works for us and what feels good to us and what satisfies us and what gets in our way that we don't think about, like, I guess what the greater good, like we're called to community, we're called to accountability, we're called to, you know, all of these things that include thinking of other people and doing good for the sake of others, not just for ourselves. But in a society that says, do what you want, do what's best for you, go by whatever fits you and whatever makes you feel good, we're so far from that. And even Christians, like the lines become so blurry because the more society accepts, the harder it is for us to go against the grain of that, because that's what's societally acceptable. That's the norm. So it's so hard to like stand firm in scripture, even though we know what scripture says, when it's even in our government being taken and twisted and distorted all kinds of ways. It's really confusing and it's really difficult, especially for people that don't have a firm foundation, and even for those that do. And in terms of, you know, what you were talking about with government or police brutality, like even way back, you know, when things started being publicized over, you know, the cop cams with Trayvon Martin, it was so difficult having to battle my flesh, because seeing people out in the streets, you know, protesting and rioting and screaming and angry and calling for blood, like that's what I wanted to do too, because that is human nature. Like we see hurt and it breaks us. We see unequal treatment, and that's how it feels. And it's such a battle of flesh versus spirit, of, you know, what does God call me to do versus what my flesh really wants to do deep down at its core. And there are so many people that give themselves over to that because it's easier than going against the grain, than doing, you know, what's not in our nature, because sin is in our nature, wrong is in our nature, anger and, you know, lust and, you know, everything that's all in our nature, because we're born in sin. We're not good at our core is the essential of it. So it's a really hard battle. It is. You're on mute, Daniel.
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm glad that you brought that up. I wanted to highlight, so for example, like the Black Lives Matters movement, something you said a minute ago about being individuals. And I think that you were so right in that, because when it started happening with Trayvon Martin, with even now still with Breonna Taylor and with George Floyd, like in my head, I think it's not happening to me. That's not happening to my family. Like, I'm okay, you know? And even now I can still think like, wow, like that's really sad that these people are going through this. But my hope is that they don't yield to anger. They don't yield to, you know, sinning in their anger. And because of that, you know, I feel almost insensitive. Like I feel like I'm being mean in a way. Like I'm not thinking about those other people. But it's like, and it's a battle, like you said, you know, it's like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be angry with you? Like, I don't feel angry. I really don't. And I'm okay. And I sympathize and I believe in justice. I believe that I serve a God of justice. I believe that it's going to happen. But, you know, because it's not happening to me, I almost feel numb. I almost feel like that's really sad. And I hope that y'all can get through it. And when it happens to me, I hope that I too can have the strength, and I hope that I too can have the community that supports justice, but without the anger, without the the rioting. And I mean, and this is just me, but I don't think that the rioting was appropriate. I get that it's a message, and I think that that's a part of the American culture, the protesting, the right to protest, the right to, that's how America started, the Boston, Tea Party, rioting and all of those things. And I get it, but, sometimes I come down to a kind of like a God, like, what should I do in this situation? How should I respond? And what I've been doing is simply just, telling people to forgive and telling people to be more understanding and be more patient and continue to love those in their communities. What do y'all think about the Black Lives Matters movement?
Yeah, go ahead.
You can go.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Being a young adult, this is new. It's all new. I've never ever have seen something like this or this much attention to it. So definitely, it's very hard because you don't know the full aspect of it. There's only so much media shows you. Twitter, everybody's on a rampage, so you don't know where to look. You don't know where to research what's true, what's not true, what to believe. So it's very confusing, but at the same time, you have to look at it as, well, how do we change the system? But you can't stay quiet, because if you stay quiet, then nothing has changed, and more people, not just the Black community, but also Hispanics and everybody else, what changes? So how do you not be angry and not change something? Like, I don't see how you can't. How do you make change you can't just sit back and say, well, it's not happening to me, because then nothing changes. Nothing ever changes if you say that, and to a certain extent you can pray and all this other stuff, but you also have to take action as well. So that's my question to you, Daniel, is just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it does need to be changed. So, some aspects of Black Lives Matter I do agree with, protesting peacefully, but the minute you burn down businesses and everything, that's where the line, in my opinion, should be drawn. I don't think you need to burn down things or beat people up. That's not the idea or the goal that we're trying to go for. It's changing the justice system, not beating people down. So,
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with Elena as well. I just can't rock with what you said, Daniel. I just can't. I do believe that there's a difference between righteous anger and sinful anger. I do believe there's a difference between rioting and protesting. And again, that we're almost a decade deep in all of this being publicized. And what's broken my heart is part of what you said is that, oh, I feel for them, but I'm not doing anything. And especially from like white evangelicals, when everything first started, that is where the temptation to sin and anger came for me, because people would get killed. And instead of mourning, people's first thought was, oh, well, what did they do? Oh, well, we don't know all the facts yet. Someone's child is dead. And that's what matters. And your heart should be broken for a life taken, because it's not our job to decide who lives and who dies. That's God's job. So for someone to take that matter into their own hands, and then for you to have the audacity to ask, oh, well, what did they do? Maybe they deserved it. Nobody deserves that. And so as time grew, it was very difficult to continue to see it, because since George Floyd was killed, almost every single day, another person of color, another Black body, another whatever has been, wrongfully incarcerated, has been killed, has been, subject to police brutality. So it's not even a matter of like, oh, well, this happens super infrequently. I can pull up every single day. It got to the point I couldn't even get on social media. And especially back when Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and, Philando Castile and all of those happened, it got to a point where I was in that place, where you're like, I feel numb to it, because it's like, how long can you let this anger simmer underneath? Like at some point you do kind of feel like you have to tune it out, because it hurts and it cuts so deep. But then recently, I have taken part in, the Austin Justice Coalition here in Austin. I've done peaceful protesting, and I do think that makes change. There are, things as far as like, changing the APD's budget, and that happening all across the states, with people that are still protesting now 86, 100 days in, and change is slow. But back when Trayvon Martin happened, there was no change. And now people are tired and they're sick and they're fed up. And so now there's longevity. And I think that is what's creating change. And I do think, like Elena said, there's a productive and conducive way to go about it. But I don't think that silence can be done. And I don't think just saying forgiveness has to happen, or I'll pray over the situation. Prayer is amazing, but we are also called to action as believers. And when there's mistreatment, when there's hurt, when there's brokenness, if there's something we can do to meet that brokenness where it is, that's our call to do. And I don't think that it's our job to stay silent and sit back just because it's not us. Because if it was us, if tomorrow my brother or my father was shot dead in the streets and I wasn't out protesting for other people or making my voice heard for other people's lives that were taken, I can't expect someone to do that for me, because I didn't rally behind anyone else. I didn't support anyone else. I supported quietly, but how much would it break my heart if everybody that was out here screaming for other people was supporting me behind the scenes quietly and doing nothing? And I'm out here making my voice heard and pushing and fighting and hurting and broken, and everyone else is like, we'll pray for you. I don't need you to pray for me. I need you to help. So I do think that as believers, it is our call to help just as much as it's our job to, because I think we can help and show Jesus. I think we can be light in the midst of where hate is at. But if we don't ever bring ourselves to places where hatred sits or where darkness sits, we can't affect any change. So I do think that's a requirement, and how much or how little, that's up to each individual person. But I don't think nothing is ever going to be the answer.
I agree. So you were talking about, why did I change it? You were talking about, Elena, she brought up the justice system, and you were talking about not doing anything. So what is the combination of justice and doing something? I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was like, we have to know who our ADA is. Our district attorney, we have to know who we have to know the lawyers. We have to know these people in order for us to, have communication. And then when we vote in November or whenever, we have power to put these people in office. So we know what these people are about. We know that they are, I'm not saying that, I can't imagine any politician just outright saying that I am a racist, and therefore, if you are white, you should vote for me. Like, no one's going to say that. However, I hope not. And, shoot, actually, yeah, go ahead and say that so that we can know. But I can only imagine, like how, I don't know if y'all know any websites. My mom, she was telling me about some website and about how, like, who we can vote for and knowing what they're about. And I didn't know this thing existed. So I can only imagine, like, do you guys know any like forms of like how we can know who we're voting for, how we can know, like, okay, so some people responded by harassing the district attorney that's up in I think was it Kansas or somewhere. I don't remember where it was, and that's just insensitive of me, and I'm sorry. But with I believe with the Breonna Taylor case and those police officers who haven't been tried. So like the people were harassing the district attorney and was like, why haven't you done this? And they were at his house. And in my opinion, I don't think that's going to bring change. I think that it was aggressive enough to make the public think, oh, like, this is serious. Like, we need to do something about this. Like, we can't think any longer that people aren't being, harassed. We can't think that Black people aren't being persecuted in the streets. Like, we just can't think that anymore. That's happened. We got that change in view. But when it comes to our justice system, I feel like harassing the ADA or the district attorney, like, that wasn't a good idea. Like, do y'all know any other ways that we can respond to this justice system?
I don't know that I'd call it harassment. I think in all honesty, we need to apply pressure, because you're right in regards to Breonna Taylor. At this point, unless you live under a rock, there's nobody who does not know what has gone on. There is footage, there is evidence, we have the names, we have eyewitnesses, we have everything we need, and justice is not doing its job. Our system is not doing its job. So if we're having to go up to someone's house, if we're having to, send out petition after petition, if we're having to send email after email, make phone call after phone call, apply pressure in whatever is necessary, you will not do what is right. So we will press until you do what is right. And I think I'm going to use this loosely because I don't want to misconstrue this, but so similar in scripture where, it talks about if a brother wrongs you, you go to him one-on-one. If you can't resolve the issue, you go grab someone else and you bring them along with you as an advocate. And if they still won't listen, you bring, now a group of people, and you have that, and if still, then you cast them out. But our justice system doesn't work that if somebody doesn't do their job, they go. Like, in our justice system, you have to literally murder someone and be standing over them with the knife when they catch you yelling out, "I murdered this person," to be kicked out of a government position. Like, impeaching is not happening. Like, people are not leaving when they're not doing their job. They're just sitting comfortably hiding while people are out suffering, while justice is not being served. So I think we tried peaceful, we tried quiet, we tried, prayer, we tried sitting on our hands, we tried all of these quiet things, and now it's time to be loud. Just like, people love to quote Martin Luther King as a symbol of, being peaceful and allowing, I have a dream of people coming together. But Martin Luther King talked about how we cannot have civil disruption without the law being broken, without there being some type of break in the law, which is why there were things like protesting and boycotting, because Martin Luther King, though he believed in protest and nonviolence, he also believed that we could not live in a society with change being affected without there being some type of break in the system. So we have to break the system. I think that that's required. Now, as far as, informing yourself and things like that, there are websites like, vote.org, Voto Latino. You can, go on and, Google just like 2020 election, see what sector you're in, to see your officials and, who's running for what and what's there for your, your runoff elections and your primary and whatever. So those are available resources. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, we live in a broken world with broken people. There's always going to be, government was not made to be like a place of moral fortitude. So when you vote in government, 9 times out of 10, you're voting for the lesser of the two evils. Like you're not voting for the standout person who's just so above it all and wants to create equality and make everyone happy and like they're giving you lip service, but what you can do is go by the best that you know how, and in that regard, pray for the rest. I do believe in that much. Like, again, God has said that he decides who he appoints in, government roles and official positions. And I think he'll do with that what he will, but I think it's just our job to be informed and to make the best decision possible that we can with what we've got. And that's all we can do, because people are people, and you're never going to get a fully good politician. That's not a real thing.
Elena, what do you think? Or did you have anything to add?
I agree with Brittany to a certain extent. We've tried all these other nice approaches to things, and it's not working. So applying pressure, yes, but I don't think that showing up to somebody's personal house is like the best option, just because, that's their space. And, I wouldn't want somebody on my front lawn. I don't know. I wouldn't want that personally. So, privacy is also a thing with citizens, like you want your privacy and I want my privacy. And it's just, as a Christian, it's not my place to judge necessarily. So, even though it's so hard because, all these people, they killing people, and we have to point out that they're killing people, but it's also not my place to determine, how do I explain this? It's very...
Are you trying to say like we can't just be the ones to just apply vengeance? Yes, there's justice, but we can't just be like, burn their house,
yeah, exactly.
To get a vengeance on them.
It's not my place to say that. It's nobody's place to say that. Yes, they did a bad thing, and yes, we all need to be aware of it, and people need to be prosecuted the way they need to be prosecuted, but it's not my place to show up to somebody's house and destroy their family just because they hurt somebody else's family. It doesn't work like that. I don't think it should work like that.
I agree.
So that's my personal, that's the only place where I was like, I don't think you should show up to somebody's house.
I think one of the hardest things about, being Christians in America is that, especially with this situation, with bad things in general. And I'm not saying that we judge. We're not judgmental people. We are not judgmental people. But I think that, it becomes, because the word says that we can judge and we can tell people like, hey, like you did this bad. We can go to our brother and say like, hey, you acting up, like stop. But, when we throw them away, when we give them to God, it becomes, I feel like what a lot of people have done and what a lot of believers, a lot of people are distracted when they say, it's like, oh, I give it to God, but they aren't exactly like claiming that I trust whatever God decides. And, something I was reading recently in Ecclesiastes, Solomon, he's like the wisest man. And he was talking about how, it just seems like the rich, like when the rich do evil, like it just seems like they get away with it. Like, and it's like, how are they getting away with it? And it's like, and it's not exactly where is God in our justice system, but it's like where's our faith when we are responding to it, And this is me, and this is my last point, this is my last thing on it. It's just like, all people are bad, but how are we responding to it? Like, are we teaching our kids, and how are we impacting our communities? We say that, and this is for everyone who's watching. Hopefully, there'll be a bunch of people watching. Anyway, it's for those people who are saying, well, and not including me, because I say things all the time and I do things all the time. I'm a teacher and I do this you know, and I do my best to make sure that kids are making, you know, good choices. And I say like, hey, like, what is the best choice to make here? And I'm giving them opportunities constantly to make the right choice. And I'm talking to my friends and I'm saying like, hey, like, I don't think this is the best response to make in this situation, because, you know, and I mean, yes, be angry, but, and yes, apply pressure. I agree, apply that pressure. But there is something else that we can do. And what we notice, especially in young adults, is that we don't vote and that we're not knowledgeable. And it's like, oh, well, when the time comes to vote for the right people, it's like, you messed up, man. Why did you vote for him? What you vote because he got money? What? Don't vote for him. He ain't got no money. That's the reason why he's trying to become president. I'm just kidding. But no, don't read it too much into that. Anyway,
really quick.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pinpoint something you said right when you first started talking about the judgmental thing. And you said, you know, that we're called to correct our brother. I just want to really hammer in that when it comes to everything going on, especially from, you know, a justice perspective or whatever, we cannot judge everyone on the standard of Christianity. What we're called to do is correct our brother and sister, and that's assuming that they profess to know Jesus and believe what we believe. But when it comes to unbelievers, that judgment is not reserved for us at all. We are not called to accountability. We are not called to correction, because that is a completely different playing field. So if I communicate with an unbeliever about something like, you know, sex before marriage, there's no standard that they're not basing their standard on Christ. They're not basing their standard on what the word says. So I can't say, oh, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. Yes, based on my belief, it's not, but you don't believe that. So what standard do you go by? So in that regard, I just want to be very clear that we are called to correct our brothers and sisters. We're called to accountability in Christ. But for those not in Christ, we're called to love. And that is for God to deal with and judge justly by his standard and not by, you know, not by our own words and actions. So just want to.
So that's actually a good point. And the reason I say that's a good point is when you said that, so it's like, so the ADA, right? I keep saying ADA, the assistant district attorney, the district attorney, so on and so forth. Let's say that they're not believers. Let's say that, you know, applying this pressure does nothing to them. It does nothing. Like they have no conscience, or regardless of their conscience, they're still like responding in evil. So it's like what you said just now, you know, like that's God and we are supposed to respond in love. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying about forgiveness. That's what I'm saying about, you know, forgive them and apply peace to the situation, only because, like you just said, they aren't believers. So, and this is what I'm talking about between the difference between America and Christians. So like we as Christians, we have a set of values, but in America's justice system, they don't apply to, they don't have the same values. So I think that, you know, even as Christians, when we're responding to the things that are happening in the world and we're saying, you know, like, yeah, like apply pressure is applying pressure to the non-believer. Is applying pressure to the non-believer the Christian response, or is that the worldly response? You know what I'm saying?
It's both. Because while people in government positions may not be subject to God's law, they are subject to the law they took an oath to stand by. So if the law says that a crime is committed and those who commit the crime are available to be arrested and tried, then it is required by law, based on the oath that they took when they stepped into that government position. They are subject to go by what that law says because they have chosen to accept that position. So from a biblical perspective, my response is love. So if I'm going to protest, it's peaceful protesting. If it's applying pressure, it's not yelling and screaming and cursing. It's, hammering in, this is what you said you were going to do, this is what you signed up for, this is what you decided that you were going to do. If you cannot uphold your position to the effect of the law, you need to step down from this position. And that's not coming from a sinful perspective. So in what I'm doing, my job is not to sin. In their job, they're required to follow the law that they subjected themselves to. So I do still believe that applying pressure is both biblical and based on worldly perspective, because there's a justice system in place.
Cool. I like your response. Thank you for clearing
she
that
said
up.
that really well.
So is America all bad? Or do we like it here?
Okay. I don't think that all of America is bad. I mean, I really do think that there are still, great and fantastic and wonderful people, just within my church community. There's so many people who checked up on me and my family during the time of my dad passing away. So no, I wouldn't say that they're all terrible people. Now, do we all mess up? Are we all human? Do we all think with the human brain and not a spiritual aspect of it? Of course, it is what it is. But when you really sit down and you get to know somebody and you get to talk to somebody, not everyone is bad. And just because media and everybody brings out more bad than there are good, it just, people feed off of the negativity, and it sucks that it's that way. Is it ever going to change? Probably not. Do we hope for it to change? Of course. So no, in that aspect, no, I don't think that all of America is bad. And yes, I like it here. I mean, I don't know anything else either, to be fair. So that's that. But no, I'm okay here.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that America's all bad either, but I think that because I'm so like headstrong and I want things to change, it leads me to that realistic way. It leads me to that realism that, like realistically, like you're going to see more bad than good, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to see more bad than good.
But you're also, I'm so sorry, but I also feel like everybody looks for it. Me personally, I look for more negative things in a person than I do positive things. And I feel like that's 95% of people. We all look for the negative aspects in something. And that's where I feel like where you say that from.
Thank you for highlighting what I might be thinking.
Maybe.
But I mean, so in this situation, in this, in this cultural aspect of America, I'm trying to balance out, myself as a Christian and as an American. And it's like, I can't, I'm trying to choose, I really am trying to choose one over the other. And I'm really choosing my Christian lifestyle over this American life, because a lot of the American, traditions and a lot of what is displayed from the American life is like negative. And, I'm waiting for the day that the positivity is everywhere. And it aligns, in my opinion, and it aligns with my beliefs. I know that that's not going to happen because the world is the world, but I'm hopeful. And that's where I am. I'm in hope.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you honestly think that we'll ever get there? In that positive, you're waiting for the positive? Or like, what amount of positiveness are you talking about? Like,
I believe that a movement is starting. And even now, I am trying to start a movement. And I'm not talking about of just, making everybody a Christian. But I mean, really starting a movement of like peace, and really a movement of like, hey, like thinking of others. How is this impact others? How is what you say impact others? Like, I really believe that is going to, I believe it's going to happen, only because, for example, we see how social media has had such a negative impact on like just the flow of information and misinformation. And I think that it is possible that people will recognize, the negativity in information, and people will start, responding to it like, hey, like this is negative information. Like, why are you posting this just to be negative? Like, don't do that. Like, like teach us something rather than just present us with the negative view. And I'm not saying, and I mean, I don't know, do y'all watch the news? Because I don't even watch the news because I know that it's going to say something negative. So that's another thing. I think that for example, even in the news, we'll have especially, okay, so from our generation moving forward, we'll have people who live through this and realize like, hey, like I noticed that a long time ago, the newscasters were just giving negative stuff and they weren't really trying to teach the people how to live or not. I mean, I'm saying that I'm not saying that they have the full right to teach people how to live, but I'm saying that they can't just be like, oh, hey, a bunch of people were shot. Next scene, like no, like add a little something to that. Say like, hey, you shouldn't shoot people. I know that even though you were angry, I know that these people may have responded in anger. I know that they may have been trying to protect themselves, but just because you have a gun does not mean that you can just do that. And I'm not saying, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but I think that the more that we talk about it, the more the language comes out, the more that believers talk about it and really show like how to live. I think I am at a 50% chance possibility.
So now moving forward and talking about it with Christians, how do you talk about it with people who don't necessarily want to hear what you have to say about Christianity or any other religion? How do you have that conversation with somebody else who's so close-minded?
I know that it's simply planting the seeds. I know that it's simply like, hey, what do you think about this? And no, just simply just starting the conversation and then presenting and talking about your view. And then and further, giving them an example. For example, like I had I was having disagreements with my roommate, and I would demonstrate for him how I forgave him for stuff that he would do. And I would tell him like, hey, like this wasn't okay, but, and I'm not tripping, but listen, like that wasn't okay, but I forgive you for it, even though what you did was intentionally like an opposite of what that I don't like. Like, I forget what he did. Oh, so he, long story short, he was like, oh, I'm gonna cook, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no big deal. But there's this certain garlic powder that he uses that I know, like, it gives me a headache and it carries throughout the entire house. So I was like, don't use that. But he used it anyway. And I mean, and it's something so petty and it's something so small, but it was like, you in complete disregard of what I asked you not to do. Like, I asked you not to do that and you did it anyway. And and then our relationship grew to a different level. It was like, hey, I'm telling you this, and I have to communicate on a different level with him. I have to communicate on a level like, hey, I'm being serious now. Listen to me, like things like that. And I have to, like, our relationship moved in a different direction to where he began to respect me more. And I was like, okay, that's good. And that's what I'm talking about. And I mean, and I'm not saying that you have to be friends with everybody, but on some level, I had to like stop him in his tracks. And I think that that's what it is. I think that that's what you have to do with even non-believers. You have to like blind them. You have to blind Paul. Like, for example, like Jesus blinded Paul so that as he was on his way, he couldn't. You have to blind these people and then say, hey, I don't like this. And you know who I am. I know who you are. We gotta come to some conclusion. We have to come to some compromise. And I'm not talking about just like straight up, like, I'm not the one who's gonna be compromising. They're gonna be compromising. You know what I'm saying?
So my only thing is this. Not all people. So for example, when you talked about the news and you wanted people to add on, like, it's not okay for you to shoot people that are unarmed, whatever. I don't think that's possible because I don't think everyone believes that. And I don't think I think in some people there is a lack of knowledge. I think in some people it's you know better and you don't want to do better. I think about like situations. Okay, so we think of like Pharaoh with like the let my people go. The Israelites escaped. God never said that Pharaoh came to know Jesus. They just got away. Pharaoh's heart was hardened the whole time. His belief did not change that they should be an enslaved people. They were pursuing them to catch them. The only reason the pursuit stopped is because they drowned, because God stepped in and interceded. But I do think it's not ever, if we could have peace, we would not need Jesus. Because the world would be fine. And right. We're in a broken world because sin entered that world. So yes, in some people, I do think knowledge is helpful. I do think we can have peace on a small scale. I do absolutely believe that. But in a full grand scheme, absolutely not. I don't believe it's possible. I think that, just like there are people on this earth who will never know Jesus, there are people on this earth who are just truly full of hatred. Like when we people bring up the idea of like, are people good at their core? The answer is no. We're born in sin. Our desire is evil. If you've ever seen a baby, like before they learn the difference between right and wrong, if a child had the full capability and mental and physical capacity that adults had, like a lot of people would probably be dead, because when babies don't get their way, they throw tantrums. When babies don't like something, they hit you, they scratch you, they bite you. Like they have no semblance of this is not okay. They have no semblance of I don't want to hurt this person. A lot of babies find other people's harm hilarious. And it's only when they learn that we want to have empathy for others that changes. So people at their core are not good. Jesus makes us good. And there are people that, live by their own sense of morality. And so by their standard, they're good. But there are people whose own sense of morality is what society would not consider good. Where do we draw the line when it comes to deciding, what's okay to create peace and what's not okay to create peace? And it just becomes this rabbit hole of, for the sake of getting along, what do we allow? And then it becomes compromise. So like you said, for you and your roommate, that small compromise, but in the world where people have all these beliefs and some of them very dark and evil, where do we stop that compromise for the sake of what we would consider peace? And how can that truly be peace if you're living by your standard and my standard doesn't support that, but for the sake of peace, I'm letting you do what you want and it's harming me? That's not peace. Nobody can ever be fully satisfied because somebody is always going to want something different. So I think we're too different. I think the world is too covered in sin. I think we have too many different ideas for there to ever be a place of true peace. But I do believe that in some small scales, we can take steps to create peace for moments, but there's no longevity in that.
I agree with that. I agree with the small and on a grand scale. And I think my example of the news was too grand probably. And I think that's what you were getting at. But definitely on small scales. And what I mean is like in our small communities, not even small communities, but at our jobs, in our families, in our friendships, and even in those friendships, if I'm going to this gathering or that gathering, and I'm not saying go to the gathering and be like, oh, you all are sinners, but I mean, just demonstrate, just be a part of it, be active. I mean, Jesus went to parties and when people were around him, they understood the difference. Like they understood what this guy was about. So it becomes that as believers, staying in our boundaries, staying in our lines, where even though we are in the world, we're not of it, And I think that because we are not of the world, people will see that. And that's what my hope is. That's what I'm talking about. That's what my belief and my hope is in. I will always hope in people that they will always try to make the best decision. And even and especially when they're around me, they're going to say like, oh, hey, I probably shouldn't do this because this is not the best choice. And that's all it is. But if I'm still doing what they're doing, then they're not gonna care.
Yeah.
Last question. An important part of our faith as believers is, simply, being an ambassador for Christ, just being Christ-like, right? And, we talked about all these things, we talked about all these issues and how it seems like peace is so fleeting because there seems to be this like 80-20, like there's 80% just evil in the world and there's 20% good. That's what it seems like. How does it look, in your opinion, how does it look for us to really, try to bring change when it comes to like the cultural aspects of good and evil? How do you think how does that look?
So I think in this aspect of change, new generations are being brought up, and it starts with our generation teaching our children and then them teaching their children. So I definitely do think that change it's not going to happen overnight. It might not even be 10 years from now, but I do think that change will happen with our generation seeing all this other bad negativity going on. So I do think that eventually we'll get to that small piece just because a lot of us are witnessing all this stuff. So it's hard, but trying to find better words to explain it.
So I think that what it looks like for change to happen is that, even is kind of like what I was saying a minute ago, when you're around certain people or when you're around your friends, the language changes. What we talk about, we're not just talking about, oh, my girlfriend's, I don't know. I can't think in the words. But we're not saying like, oh, my girlfriend, she's a this and she's a that. She's always nagging me. She's always this, she's always that. But we're talking to each other about how to lift up each other. I think that's one of the ways that we as a people can start, we as believers, we can start impacting other people, changing the language in our conversations. That's what that looks like to me.
I think it looks like a twofold response. So I would agree with what you said about one, us looking different. I do think that that's necessary because how do people desire to learn about something when it looks just like them? Like, why? I was listening to a sermon earlier today, and they were talking about, if the way I display Jesus looks exactly like how a sinner's living, what's the call to Jesus? Why would they want it? So I think obviously looking different is part of that, but I think also authentic relationship is a part of that, because I'm a lot more likely to hear someone out that has a different perspective or that wants to call me to correction, or I'm more likely to believe that someone is looking out for my good when they know me. So if a stranger up on the street comes up to me and says something random, if they're like, oh, honestly, I don't even have an example, but if a stranger came up to the street and gave me advice, I'd look at them and I'd be like, okay, like it might be good advice. So I might be like, oh, okay, that's helpful. But like somebody that's genuinely close to me that would come to me with correction, I'm a lot more likely to take that because they know me, they've seen me, they've spent time with me, they've invested in me. So I believe them. I believe that they have my best interest at heart because they've shown that through relationship building. And just like our own personal Christian walk, like we're called to relationship with Christ. If I don't know Jesus for myself, if I have no relationship with Jesus, what is he to me? He's a book. He's instruction. And that's why a lot of, especially believers like in the millennial and Gen Z, like why a lot of Christians fall away from Christianity is because Christianity for them is a legalistic thing. Christianity is grandma brought me to church and I never missed a Sunday, and church Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Jesus sprinkled in there, but nothing with me knowing him personally. And then you get to it and you don't know Jesus. You step away from your family and their influence and realize you built no foundation because you don't know who this person is. You don't know who this God is. He's just somebody else's coattails that you rode. So the same thing where it's required relationship for us to truly have, some type of foundation with our faith and with Jesus and, with our belief system. I think it's also required with us as believers to build those relationships with other people who may not look like us or believe what we believe or sound like us, and to really come from a place of love, because people are more likely to respond to love than they are just to instruction. I think that's required.
I definitely agree with you, because I'm one of those children who my parents installed, going to church on Sunday, you have the CCE class on Wednesday, you have this on this day. I grew up that from the day one, that was it. That was Sunday was family day, Sunday was church day, Wednesday was this. It was so installed in my head. And, now in this time of being at home and my dad passing away and my grandma being sick, I'm like, why did I ever... I'm in this doubting period of wanting to be like, I don't need that. But because I don't have, yes, my mom, but I don't have somebody now who's approaching me and helping me, guide me in the right direction, because, church is not available right now. Yes, I could Google, but I'm in this lack of, I don't want to hear it. I don't care. I'm in pain. I'm grieving. Don't give it to me. Yeah. So it's hard for change to happen. So I do agree with you. And there's a lot of children, me being one of them, who this is what it was. Our parents drilled it into our head. And because you drilled it into my head so much, I'm falling out of it because you forced it.
Yeah.
So just to summarize for all of the people who will not be watching this, just kidding. I gotta stop. I'm not upset, but I'm just kind of like, oh man, where's everybody? Thank you all for, joining me. Thank you for being a part of this. Just to summarize, we talked about, social issues, basically like Black Lives Matters, and the issues with, our justice system and simply our American culture and how we respond as believers. And I think in this last part, simply us highlighting the changes that we want to see. We want to see changes in our justice system. We want to see changes within our generation. We want our generation not to make the same mistakes as the previous generations. We want to have authentic relationships. We want to have stronger and more influential, opportunities, simply opportunities that say, and it's not me going to church every Sunday, every blah, blah, blah. It's opportunities to show me how, Jesus is in my life, and just opportunities for us to have conversations with other people and change the language around it, really advise each other on what is a good choice to make, on wisdom and things like that. Thank you, Brittany. Thank you, Elena. I also want to say thank you to America, who didn't really get to participate because she was driving. I want to say thank you to Demaria, whose Wi-Fi went out, and she sent me a text message. I want to thank you guys again, Elena and Brittany. Do y'all have any final statements y'all want to make?
I think I'm good.
All right. All right, thank you guys again. I love you. I love you, and I love you, and I love you. I can't wait to do this again with you again. Let's do this often. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on Danielosophy. Despite the hardships that we face in this world, we have to stand strong in faith and pursue what displays love. I hope that this discussion reaches your home and your families. Keep the faith, love your neighbor, and we'll get through this together.